you were going to get to a point, whether you have 60% negative and 40% positive, or 50-50 or 70-30, you're always going to get to that point. It's just which we can kind of decide on and amend, and that's what the journey is, kind of figuring out which way you're going to go.
My guest in this episode grew up in Northampton with her parents and brother before moving to Hertfordshire in 2000. She has an eclectic work background and draws upon all her experience for her current job working for a local mental health charity. Outside of work, she volunteers for another charity and for her church. Mimie Hollist, welcome to Unlived Lives.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Amazing to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. Which one of your jobs has had the most profound impact on you?
Wow, what a way to start. They all have. I would probably say my first job in tennis, I was working with junior players, and I think it was just being with people who have lived their passion their entire lives. I mean, I was working with 10-year-olds all the way up to adults, and they have only lived and breathed tennis their entire lives. Wow. And seeing what that looks like when it comes to fruition.
Wow. So literally from a young age.
Yeah. The youngest people I was working with were like 8-9 years old already, dreaming of being tennis players, and were at the top of their game. So.
Wow. What was your role with that?
So I was the performance coordinator. So would look after the junior players, like I said, organising their tournaments abroad. I would do that for the juniors, and then one particular professional tennis player from the UK as well, just organising their team as well. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Where do you feel most at home?
With people. So it's not a place, it's with my family and with my friends. So when I am in the kitchen or around a table, home is definitely a sense of being amongst family for me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And does that evoke any particular memory at all?
It does, yeah. Just warmth, and like with my family, we laugh a lot there. I have a small nuclear family, but we're bigger. We're part of a bigger extended family. So just being around a big table, eating and drinking and just laughing our heads off.
Lots of food.
That's the yeah, food and laughs. That's what I like.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. And why do you have the ambitions you have?
Why do I have the ambitions I have? These are great questions. I would say, I think that I come from a family full of talented people, and I've met a ton of talented people as well. And the ambitions come from freedom, I would say, in that I was always given the opportunity to do whatever I wanted, and given a belief system that it would all work out in the end. So, if everything that I was doing and everything in my ambitions is a part of a bigger journey, and all of that contributes to it. So I've spoken about tennis, which is not where I saw myself working, but it has, what I've learnt from there has given me skills to do what I do now. And every step of the journey has been like that. There's always been something to gain. And yeah, I would say freedom, and that there are no limitations to what I could choose to do or not do, given to me by the way I was raised, I would say.
Oh wow! In what sort of way? What specifically in how you were raised?
Just that if you wanted to be an astronaut or a doctor, or if you wanted to do something completely different, I think culturally. So my background is I was born and raised in the UK, but I've got Nigerian heritage, and in that culture, there are sort of very narrow paths to go down. You would be a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or an accountant. Those are probably the big four. But growing up here and being with my parents who had a plan and changed the plan, and there was always that do not be limited by what you feel like you have to do or what you can do. Anything is possible. Sounds cheesy, but that is the belief system I grew up with.
That must have been fantastic in hindsight to grow up with.
In some ways, yeah, because there was a lot of freedom. In others, there is a lot of choice out there. We could all be many things, and we are all many things. But I think that, yeah, it came with mainly benefits and some challenges. And like I said, I've had an eclectic background because I've just been able to cherry pick what suits me and what I can get passionate about.
Is there a sort of antithesis to that?
I guess so. Like I said, being kind of trapped in there's too much choice, and I could do, I don't know, would I be outstanding at one particular area, or am I just average in all of the areas?
Jack of all trades sort of idea.
There is the challenge of not knowing where you do belong, but equally there is an opportunity to find your feet wherever you are.
I sort of feel sometimes it's difficult in that way to not have foundation in work, in what you do, that's what I find. What do you think?
I don't think my foundation comes from work. So going back to where feels like home, it's being in the family and being a human and interacting with other humans. That's where the foundation comes. Whatever I'll be doing, it will be in connection with people, and I think that's where the foundation is. Whether I'm doing traditional work or non-traditional work or raising a family, which is work, that is probably where the foundation is, not in the fact that I work for a charity now but could work anywhere next.
And so do you think it would be as effective if you perhaps didn't have such a core foundation in your family?
Definitely. I think that the family values I have are my foundation, that, and I would say a faith, a religious faith, that underpins everything. So that's probably where my foundation comes from, and then everything else can be built on and rearranged. And in the same way you have a house, you can build an extension, you can convert it back to what it was. So I would say that it stems from that, really.
Is there an art to loading the dishwasher?
There is absolutely an art to loading the dishwasher, and I am an absolute pedant about it, and I am not sorry. So I can be really particular about how things are done, from which way you put the knives, where the big plates go, where the bowls go, and I can be a little bit compulsive about how things are done, at the same time as being able to rationalise that actually if you get there in the end, everyone's journey can be different, and I can get hung up on detail. I do know that about myself, and that has been a challenge sometimes, in that I go for job interviews and they'll say, how does all your work background tie together? And traditionally it's not a progression that's been step, but it is the little details that have all worked out. So to come back round to the dishwasher, there is absolutely a way, and I will probably judge you if you don't do it my way. But if it's in my house, then I'll be loading the dishwasher.
Okay. Where does that come from?
I think that there is, it's weird to talk about pandemics and epidemics given the time we are, but there is a real maybe it's always been a thing, but I think particularly around now in the world we're living in, there's a real epidemic, I guess you could call it, pandemic of perfectionism. And that can be in how you do things, but probably more about how things are presented. Everything needs to look perfect. Sure. And it can be really easy to overinflate or catastrophize about how things might be if the little details aren't kind of lined up. And in the work I do now, the little details count. When all of those are lined up, everything's fine. But if one thing is out, you'd really notice it. Right. So I think it's partly to do with just me as a person being quite detail orientated, but also just living in a world where perfectionism is a real it's a real aspiration of people at the moment. And yes, again, as I say, you can subscribe to that, or you can rationalise that you don't need to subscribe to it. But I think ultimately, unconsciously, a lot of us do. And I know that I do.
Where does that come from? Do you think? I mean, this is entering into a wider conversation.
Yes. But a few things, really. I take pride in doing things properly. I also remember being given some advice, sort of growing up and looking quite different to the people that I grew up with, in that, you know, you cannot put a foot wrong because that has bigger repercussions than, you know, who you might think you're alongside. Actually, there's a different perception of you as a person. So I think probably that more than anything, like a, you know, not a pressure thing or a familial thing, but more about fitting into a place where I already look different and perceive differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds like a journey.
Quite a journey, I can't lie.
When did, going back to the dishwasher, when did you discover that about yourself, or when did it become apparent?
Really early on. My brother and I are 2 years apart, and it's really interesting talking to him about how he found his place in the family. But I feel like when we were really young, I needed to know that actually I'm the older sibling and things need to be like this, and then they work out, because neither of my parents are like that. So This is quite, there are other people in the family who are like that, but it is quite particular to me, being probably a bit more high-strung than the people that I grew up in a household with. And I remember sort of being quite young and playing with my brother and him not doing it right when it's playing. You know, playing shouldn't have any form or structure. But it was a young age. And probably part of the journey is learning to be okay with things not going your way, but the outcome being how I might have wanted it to be.
Oh, wow. And have you spoken about that since with your brother?
Oh, yeah, we speak about it all the time, and we're quite close, so we know each other down to a T. So, you know, it's really good to speak to him about it. So when we're putting the world to rights or trying to, like, muddle our way through life, it's a really good opportunity for him to say, well, actually, you're like this, remember? So you might look at things like this, but this is the other perspective. So yeah, we do talk about it. We keep coming back to how we are and how he's really spontaneous and likes some grounding and has some rules, but is able to be really creative within that. So it has shaped who we both are, I guess.
Have you always been able to take his opinion or advice?
Oh, absolutely not. I did not trust who he was or anything until we didn't become friends until I was about to leave home. So
How old were you then?
18 when I went off to university. But it took until about 6 months before I left. I was maybe about 17 when we started to actually get along. It's a case of actually you've had really similar experiences, and you have the same values, and you've been taught a particular way about looking at life, but then you've got this bonus if you've had someone who can see it from a slightly different plane, but knows you well enough to tell you about yourself. So.
Is there anything you regret not doing due to fear?
Yes, I think so. I'm absolutely not one of these people who are like, oh, I live with no regrets, because I do. And I think that there is a peace that comes with being in my 30s as I am now, but I think I regret being hung up on a plan A and not having any other sort of... I had a plan I wanted to be an orthopaedic surgeon, and I decided that when I was quite young, and picked everything I did at school and at uni to kind of fit that, and then actually realised probably just before I got to uni, if I'm really honest, but definitely once being in uni, that it wouldn't suit me. You know, how am I going to be a surgeon when I really thrive on being able to interact with people and talk to people? So I need them to be awake when I'm working with them. And not really thinking about what else. And like I said, you know, that was in uni at my early 20s, and only getting to the 30s and realising actually all of that has had value, and I can interact and enjoy those connections with people, but I didn't need to be so hung up or spend the rest of my 20s being like, oh, I failed because I'm not a surgeon, because there's so many other things of equal value or more valuable to me that I've done. So
where did the surgeon idea come from?
I broke my foot when I was about 6 years old. I was... I think I'm mentioning my brother a lot, but I was grassing him up for something he'd done, and how snitches get stitches. I tripped over one of his shoes at the bottom of the stairs and broke my foot in 2 places. And even though it was such a long time ago, I have such a vivid memory of the pain and how it felt when my foot was set. So when it was put in a cast, I honestly thought the orthopedic surgeon was a magician. And he was really lovely, really warm. He was actually a Nigerian, like my parents. So, and I just remember really connecting to that. He was able to... I went from not being able to, when I was being driven to the hospital, not being able to take a single road bump or turn in the road to having my foot set, and that's when I was like, right, this is what I'm going to do. So,
and you carried that all the way.
And just a real interest. I really like science and the body. I think the body is the biggest masterpiece going. You know, it's by design, it's incredible. So that plus my own experience of being in hospital for that and a couple of other things, just being like, right, I want to help people feel like they're not in pain anymore. And that was, you know, 6-year-old me really only saw that as like physical pain, but actually there are lots of different ways you can be in pain. And maybe the sort of route I've gone has helped people alleviate their pains, I would say.
Sure. In a non-physical but mental way.
I mean, currently it's emotional. Even before where just in between tennis and the counselling charity I'm at now, it's customer service, and it is just appeasing someone who might be really hurt over having a jumper that has a hole in it. It can, you know, which means a lot to the person at the time. So
So how did you discover sort of mental health work?
It was. So I worked in customer service, and it was really interesting. There would be people who would, just because you're a voice on the end of the phone, would kick off, and to the point where you could think, is it me? Or where I started to wonder about what was driving people to do that. What kind of days had they had? What was going on? What, you know, was it really just a hole in a jumper, or was there something more? At the time I'd been living in London as well, and, you know, the pressure of living in London and socially and economically, and just trying to fit that all in. I really wanted to sort of lower the pace of what I was doing and be in a calmer place as well. I also had, I think, like I said before, you know, decided I wasn't going to be a surgeon, but spent a lot of time wondering about what I might do instead. So at that point, moved back to Hertfordshire, discovered counselling, and at the same time as looking for a job, found this job that wasn't in counselling, you know, and becoming a counsellor, but related to a journey into the self and finding peace from within. So that's how I came across counselling.
Oh, wow. Where does your model of a normal home life come from?
does a normal model exist? That would probably be my first question. My normal model comes from all I've known. So that is, I might come back to the table analogy. So just, that everybody having a place at a table, that doesn't necessarily need to be your mum, your dad or your siblings. It can be anybody. It can be a person, or it can be a sense of being in a collective of people. I don't think that there's a normal home life. I just think that maybe I would say normal home life is the feeling of love and acceptance and belonging, rather than, I had a normal household because I grew up with a dad and mum and brother.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so it's more around what is present in emotions and in belonging than what the setup is.
Is it better to give money to government or to charity?
I get asked this a lot. It's really interesting. I spoke to someone a few months ago who was saying that charity work just subsidises the government, and the government should be responsible for what charities do. And maybe to some degree that is true. I think that people need to, if they want to give and they're in a position to give, it needs to resonate with what they believe in.
Sure.
So that might be the government for some people. That might be directly to the charity. That might be directly to who needs that charity. It's quite a personal decision, I would say. Yeah.
And do you have a decision in that area?
Personally, for me, I feel like I get taxed for work, and that's enough for the government. And then where I might donate to a charity, again, is where it resonates with me. And it's not always money.
Sure.
It can be time.
Of
but, there are places where your money can go quite far. And I feel like I've got the freedom to do that because tax is what it is. Whether I think it's reasonable or not is another thing, but tax is done, and then you can think about what comes next. And I feel like I've got resources to, more time, probably more than anything, but the government and its structure has allowed me to be able to work for a charity and volunteer at a charity and donate to other charities. So I don't know if you could have one without the other, really. But personally, I think my heart currently sits with charities, not that I'm not kind of...
anti-establishment.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Sure.
yeah, and I'm not about to say drop taxes or anything like that, because I think the government have a really difficult job to look after a huge group of people with lots of different needs. And I wouldn't want to do it. So I'd rather just let them have what they need to do it. So.
So there's a certain harmony or disharmony, depending on how you look at it, between them both existing.
You need, if the government was doing everything that what I think a lot of people expect of the government, you might not have charities. But then also I think that, it does let the philanthropic element of people kind of come to light when they feel like they're closer to the charity than if they were just kind of giving all their resources to the government and putting them in charge of being responsible of that.
So from a marketing perspective, it's more effective.
Yeah, I think it connects with people. Well, people like me, I can't speak for everybody, but people like me, or maybe people that, do need to feel like they can see where their charity is going. I think the charity's the right route for them, so it can feel real. And there is quite a lot of mistrust around the government from some people. So, and even, there can be corruption everywhere, even in charity, but I think that there is some reassurance in being able to see where your resources are going. I really like, just before when we were talking about kind of, you might be doing something with a charity, and it's not that I'm completely altruistic, that I do get a lot out of it, but I really resonate with hearing your time has done this, or your resources has done that, or this is the child that you've helped, and look at what they're learning in school because you've donated to that charity, for example.
What's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
I think there are so many kind people. Probably the kindest thing and the thing that I thrive off is just allowing me to be me. So the pedant that stacks the dishwasher in the weird way, the person that doesn't have a traditional like career path, just lets me crack on with who I want to be. I think that's the kindest thing, where I can be with people who do not judge or ask of any more or less of me than just being myself. That again comes a lot from family, from faith, from the people I spend time with, but I think that's the biggest kindness. That's what I live from, actually. Like, I find that really reassuring, and not everyone does that, and there are environments where you can't do that, and I think that helps us as people thrive. So if I can be afforded that, and if I can afford that to others, then that is the kindest act you can do. It doesn't cost much to allow people to just live their lives without judgment.
Shame.
Yeah.
What's the root of all shame, do you think?
I think fear is a big part of it, whether it's fear on the part of the individual experiencing the shame because of what is supposed to be perceived and projected out to the world, but then also if you're in an environment where you feel like you would be shameful, that says a lot about the people who are perhaps allowing you to go down that path. Fear of difference on their part might cause people to not feel like they can be themselves,
to be singled out.
Yeah. I think fear is a root of shame. I would say that.
And I guess it turns perhaps into a vicious cycle as well, because you can have, shame then promotes the fear of then doing that again, and you sort of, it feeds into one another, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is cyclic. It is.
That's a much better way of putting it.
No, but how, absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head. You might do it again, or you might do more to cover up your shame, and then the shame grows, and then I imagine, and again, I guess thinking about when I felt ashamed, you can really, that shame can grow, and you can really lose your sense of self without that, to a point where it becomes a little bit of a comfort blanket. You think, well, this is all I know now, and I'm always going to have to hold this shame. And I could sit here and say, on a good day, yes, the shame is a part of my journey. But on other days, it's something that can stay with you. And there's a lot of work to be done around kind of shedding that.
In society,
individually, for me personally, that it can be.
And for me, in my therapy experience, despite, feeling like I'm much more capable on top of life, certainly in regards to shame, it doesn't feel like it's ever truly resolved. There's always it always comes back and goes, hello, I'm still here. But it's just your ability to move through it, move past it, move with it, feel it, and then keep going.
That's it. Is it to be lived with and tolerated, or is it to be shed? I
mean, is it possible to be completely shed?
I don't think so.
I mean, we're generalising. Well, I'm generalising.
Yeah.
But, it's case by case, I guess. But.
I don't know. As I say, maybe on some days you can live through it or be above it or kind of look at it in the rearview mirror. But then I do also think that it is character building and a part of who you are. So not that you would hold on to it. I think that we can, when we're not addressing it, it can be held on to and hold you back sometimes. But it is, for me, and maybe if we are generalizing, it is something to be managed and tolerated and sometimes overcome in those situations where shame might hold you back from kind of stepping forwards.
Do you ever think we could be in a world where there is no shame, hypothetically, and how would that affect society? I personally don't think so. I think that shame is a part of humanity, even if it could be, just thinking about even why we wear clothes or, why people don't talk about what salary they're earning or how much savings they have. I think that it's part of society. And sometimes, we spoke a bit about fear and about how fear can kind of sometimes be a fuel for people. But I think shame is just, it couldn't all be roses. And, shame can demonstrate your resilience. And I think society has to be resilient. And there are things in history that have happened in society that we shouldn't forget and we should feel shameful about and have to hold that to be able to make better decisions in the future. Lessons to be learned from it.
Always.
And going forward. And you touched on briefly the idea of people being ashamed to tell people how much they earn. Would you be comfortable telling friends and family and people how much you earn?
My really close friends and family, yes, absolutely. I spent some time in Spain, and it's really interesting, actually, in their culture. You can look up anybody's salary in a company that you work with, and it's not kind of shrouded in secret. So maybe salary compared to savings, actually, that's probably a bit different because your savings demonstrate what you do with your funds when you get them. I think at where I am now in my journey, with the people I'm closest to, I think they would know, but I wouldn't broadcast it on my LinkedIn profile, for example, but because there is an element of, yes, I can be open, but if the world isn't open, you've also got to be in the world as well as like of the world.
Yeah. What would you prefer?
I think I would like a little bit more transparency. I think that there are a lot of mixed messages and a lot of misinterpretations from some of the ways that we operate as a society. Equally, it's such a delicate balance. I don't think you could go too far the other. I think too far the other way would cause different problems, but to an equal effect if there was too much out there about everybody.
Because there's such a diverse range of, as you were saying before, with governments, they have to deal with people with so many different needs and situations that. No,
it wouldn't suit everybody. I don't think complete transparency, but equally, if the government got a bit more secretive, that wouldn't suit the masses either.
I'm sure, the idea of the term "one size fits all." I often feel is used, to try and solve problems.
Yeah.
And obviously doesn't. What do you think?
No, I don't. And I think that, you and I, we've spoken a bit about therapy and counselling, and I think that actually we're all such individuals that there is no, unless, depending on what it is, there is hardly anything where one size does fit all. I just don't think that that's the case. I think that we are all on a journey. Even if you go into a shop and you're a particular clothes or dress size, you can go into another shop and be a different size, or the t-shirts might fit you in one size and then the shorts fit you in a different. There isn't one size fits all. We're all on a journey. There are some things which can benefit the majority, but I don't think one size fits all. I think we're all on quite personal journeys which contribute to where we're going as a collective as well. And that will benefit. And I guess with government, their aim is to benefit as many people as possible. But I don't think we could live in like utopia, as things are now.
Do you think it's possible though?
I mean, my faith talks about where utopia is possible, but I just don't think that, we inhumans in this time are able to achieve that.
And the root of that is?
None of us live in utopia. None of us as humans are in utopia. There is light and dark in all of us, so that will be within the world.
Balance. Yeah.
Always balance.
Can't have yin without the yang, all
No.
those. Yeah.
No. And like I said, it has some negative effects, but also it can be part of the journey. I think my personal philosophy is you were going to get to a point whether you have 60% negative and 40% positive, or 50-50 or 70-30, you're always going to get to that point. It's just which we can kind of decide on and amend, and that's what the journey is, kind of figuring out which way you're going to go.
If you knew you only had 1 year to live from now, how would you spend the next 12 months?
I think I would go bananas with making sure I have as much time with the people that I love, and just really cherishing those moments. There's a lot that I want to see and do in the world. I feel like I would rather stay at home with my family than go travelling. If I'm like, I've never been to New Zealand, for example, but it would be just to really make the most of that time with the family. And then, just like we were talking about before, really kind of get to grips with this concept of you have to let regrets go now so that you can enjoy that year. I think that's what I would spend the time doing. It'd need work, but, whether or not there's time for that, there is always time for being with the people that I love.
Who or what might have stopped you from realising your full potential?
Me. It's myself. That sounds a bit selfish, but I have been privileged with pretty much all of the opportunities I could have hoped or dreamed for. And if I haven't taken hold of them, it's because I've told myself I can't, or let that kind of negative chatter get really loud. I'm not saying that there aren't people or obstacles or situations that, have been beyond my control, but I think how I perceive all of that can determine whether or not I'm going to meet my full potential.
Mimie Hollist, thank you so much for coming on the programme. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. It's been a pleasure.
Amazing. If you enjoyed this exploration into Mimie's unlived life, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel for a new episode every Wednesday. Did you gain something from this episode? Let me know in the comments section. I hope you enjoyed watching.